connection to you and your book. Hi everyone. Really happy to be live with Adam Oyebanji. Is that how I pronounced your
It
surname
is.
right?
It is. Hi.
Hi. Would you like to start off by introducing yourself and your books?
Yes. So I'm. My name is Adam Oyebanji. I live in Edinburgh, Scotland now, but I've lived in a vast number of places, including the United States. I spent 23 years in the United States, sometime in Nigeria, various places in England, Birmingham, which is where I went to university, for instance. Um, but I came back to Scotland, which is actually where I was born about 3 years ago, and that's where I live now. When I'm not writing, I work in financial counterterrorism, which is a whole different level of stress. So writing is kind of a fun release for me. And then in terms of books, a couple of weeks ago, my latest book, Esperance, was launched. It's published by Arcadia in the UK and Door in the US. And I think the easiest way to describe Esperance is as a police procedural that, you know, gets kind of weird, right? So um, we have this detective, Ethan Kroll, who's on the 20th floor of a Chicago apartment building where a father and son have been found dead with their lungs full of seawater, even though Chicago is hundreds of miles from the ocean. And then we have a lady called Abidemi Eniola, who's arrived in Bristol here in the UK. She claims to be Nigerian, but her accent is wrong. And she can do remarkable things with technology, things that her new friend Holly Rogers has never seen before. And Abby is in possession of a number of heirlooms which need to be returned to their rightful owners. And Holly is always up for a bit of fun, is all in to go along for the ride. The thing is, neither Abby nor her heirlooms are quite what they seem. And Abby is actually a target of Ethan Kroll's investigation, which means that Holly has found herself in a situation way stranger than she'd bargained for, and in what becomes a clash of cultures and histories and different ideas about justice. The consequences are going to be deadly. And that's the book, in essence.
It's very well described. Um, it's got all the elements of a classic locked room mystery in points, hasn't it?
Yes, yes. Um, it's you know, because this is a slightly weird police procedural, the solution to the locked room is also slightly weird, but absolutely, and um, it's one of the things that you know drives my detective absolutely potty, you know, because he's a straightforward, slightly conservative, not particularly imaginative man, who finds himself confronted with circumstances that get stranger and stranger at every turn, and just keeps plodding on. You know?
And he has a lot of his own problems, doesn't he, Ethan? Especially at the beginning of the book, he's kind of got a very difficult relationship with his family, I think is a fair thing to say.
He does. He does. He's not unlike many police officers. You know, his divorced. He's not as he has difficult relations with his wife. He's not estranged from his daughter, but he disapproves of his daughter's choice of fiance, and that is a stressor between them. It's very much um, you know, preying on his mind. And then he's reached an age where health problems are also an issue for him. So really, you know, the last thing he needed was two dead bodies on the 20th floor of a Chicago apartment building when the novel starts. But you know, that's his bad luck.
But what a way for the novel to start, because you're already intrigued. Because you've got these people that are found, like you said, they're dead, they've got seawater in their lungs, they are nowhere near an ocean. So, how has anyone got. And all the explanations they come up for like seawater just don't work, do they? They're like they filled the bath and put salt in the water, and it's It's a lot more complicated than that, and
It is. I've tried to. What I've done, I mean, essentially, in the book is treat it seriously as a police procedural, right? Real world police procedural of the sort that you're no doubt familiar with this one weird thing that has happened, right? And then if the one weird thing were to actually happen in the real world, this is the way I envisage real world people would deal with it, you know. And the thing about real world people, when they come across things that are weird, they don't immediately think this is weird, right? They look for more normal explanations, and that's what, you know, Ethan and his colleagues, because he has a team of people as a detective. That's what they try to do, and like the seawater, and the seawater is quite a good example because, you know, obviously you can't drown 20 stories up in the middle of the continental United States in an ocean. It's just not possible. And so they work through, you know, well, how can you get seawaters into someone's lungs? And you know, they give it a good old college try, as the Americans say, before they they just have to abandon that and just move on, following other clues, in the way that um, I think in a different context, they're confronted with a particular mystery, and the response of one of the police officers, well, we'll ask him when we catch him, right? Um, so they don't, again, um, they're following a police playbook, and they don't necessarily have to understand everything. They just follow the clues where it takes them. And fortunately for them, seawater isn't their only issue. You know, they think they've got a decent lead on a suspect, and that sets hairs running for them. And but it sets them on a path, as I say, that gets stranger and stranger the deeper we go into the novel.
no, it really does. Um, do you think the time you spent living in America helped with this? Is that partly why it's set in America?
Oh, absolutely. You know, you can't live 23 years in the States without it leaving a mark, right? So the locations that are in the book, both in the UK and in the US, are places I have lived, right? So I hope that gives a sense of grounding to people. I mean, I've spoken to people in the States who find the US setting very realistic, you know, and I've spoken to people here in Edinburgh and down in Bristol, where some of the book is set, and they find it realistic. So I feel, fingers crossed, that I've managed to give the book a good sense of place, you know, a good setting for these things to happen.
There's another character who speaks like they're out of a 30s kind of movie. Is that also a bit of a nod to like the detective noir
It
style?
it it is a wee bit. I don't want to give away too many spoilers, though.
No, I'm trying
There's
not
a
to give it
No,
away.
no, you're doing a great job. I'm struggling about the answer. Yes, there's a little bit of that, and I did spend an inordinate amount of time watching old gangster movies from that period to get a sense of the language and the delivery and the slang. Um, at least that's what I told people. I just had a great time watching gangster movies. Um, uh, but there's a reason that the character talks that way, which is part of the weirdness of the book.
Yes,
And
no, we're not going to give away
I
the reason.
no, and I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with that. Absolutely.
I also really like the hints of like, I presume genuine Nigerian language
Hmm.
throughout and bits of the culture and things that are sort of woven in. I think that makes it a more unusual story.
I tried to do that, not too much, you know, but just enough to give people a flavour. You know, Abby's native language is a Nigerian dialect. The most of the language in the book that's not English is Yoruba. You know, which is my father's language. I don't speak it at all well. You know, actually, that's a lie. I don't speak it at all. I know some words. You know, and I know vaguely how the language is put together, but ask me to speak it, absolutely not. The fun fact for me The audiobook is narrated by a lady called Dele Ogundiran, who's an American who lives in Brooklyn. But her parents are Nigerian, and her Nigerian accent is perfect. So when you hear these words, usually when you write a book, if you have words, particularly words from a language like Yoruba, the the audio company come back to you and say, "How do we pronounce these words?" Right? No, didn't happen because Della knew how to say all of these words, so they just appeared, which was terrific because I was really worried I'd have to brush up my intonation because Yoruba is a very tonal language. It's like Mandarin. Um, it's not vowels and consonants like English or Swedish. But I was saved that particular torture.
That's good. When I've looked at your other books, because I liked Esperance so much, I went on a hunt
Oh,
to see what else I
thank
could
you.
go and read afterwards. You've got kind of more classic crime, right? And you've got science fiction. Is that what chose you to sort of delve into doing a bit of speculative crime? Because speculative crime is quite popular at the moment.
Yeah, it's the way this happened is I'm mostly steeped in science fiction. Like my debut novel, Breaking Day, is a just out and out space opera, right? And I thought, well, I'm a science fiction writer. I'll write science fiction, and I got it published. But I woke up one day, literally woke up. This is not how it usually works, with a character in my head who was not a science fiction character, just wasn't. And I put him to one side because I don't write anything but science fiction, and he wouldn't go away. And then I thought, well, I'll make a few notes. And then I thought, well, I'll do a quick outline. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll just write something. It never has to see the light of day because I'm a science fiction writer. And I wrote it, and I sent it to one of my wife's friends. And the important thing about her is she's not my friend. I don't think she hates me, but you should never send your manuscripts to your friends because they lie to you, right? And she came back, and she's an avid reader of mysteries, and she said, "This is pretty good." And she had a couple of suggestions. I thought, well, it works. And then I called up my agent, whose interests in life are world peace, adult science fiction, and North Carolina basketball, not necessarily in that order, and said, I've written a written a murder mystery. Will you sell it for me? And sort of held the phone at arm's length while this storm of surprise came out of the speaker. But he did, bless him, he did sell it, and then we sold a sequel to that, which has done reasonably well. And then once I knew I could write a mystery, right, I thought, well, why not blend the two? I know because I know I can write science fiction, and I thought, well, can I write a mystery, Earthbound? Right? And I thought, yeah, I can do that, and that's how Esperance came about, essentially.
I think what's interesting, without giving too much away, is quite science fictiony for speculative crime. Speculative crimes often set in the near future,
Mm.
with like very big what if questions, and there's a lot of very good writers out there doing that. This one goes a bit more into the science fiction. I think you probably do have to be maybe a little bit of a fan of sci-fi as well,
I think,
or a bit more open to sort of that. I think it's a bit there is without giving away spoilers, it is more sci-fi-ish in places, isn't it?
yeah, I think it gets more sci-fi as it goes along, but I don't think. I think if you're the sort of person for whom the just the syllable sci-fi, if that brings you out in hives, right? Do not read Esperance. It's just you'll hate it. But if you tried speculative fiction, or you're what I would call science fiction curious, then there I don't think there's so much in it that it should put you off. If you are mainly a crime reader, but you don't object to little bits of weirdnesses. Because I think that there is science in it, but I don't think it's overwhelming, you know. And so unless science irritates you, uh, I think you'd be okay. I think you'd be okay.
No, I'm 100% coming to this as a fan, a very, very big fan of Esperance. I don't think I can say that enough. I'm absolutely in awe of the book. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
And I think it's wonderful with elements of science fiction, and it's wonderful as a crime novel. There's like so many good bits about it that are woven together so well. It works really well for me. Um, but yeah, it's the most probably sci-fi-ish speculative crime I've read.
Well, you know, then uh, I'm going to take that as a compliment. I think it's hopefully still accessible. I tried to make it not too in your face. You know, as I said earlier, I think, you know, if the science fiction bits actually happen in the real world, then I think this is might be a way the real world would react to it, and that's how I tried to write it. And I think if the reader is open to that, then they should have a blast. I think it should be quite fun, and it's a. I think you may disagree because you read it. I only wrote it, right? But I really tried to make it a kind of fair play mystery, so that you know as much as the detectives do as they move through the story, um, so that I would hope at least some readers get there before the main character does, and then those that don't can at least say, oh well, now I see how this fits together. I don't, I really don't want people to get to the end of this book and think I sort of quote unquote cheated. I tried very hard not to.
I mean, no, you don't get to the end of the book and do that. I think by the time you get to the end of the book as a reader, you are so intertwined in everybody's story. So it's not just Ethan. There's so many
No.
people in it that you are really involved with by the end that you kind of just need to see how it all plays out for everybody. And then there are so many, and this is a joy of speculative crime for me. There's so many bigger questions raised
Mm.
by the story. We won't give away that you're going to go away and think about. Do you know what I mean? Are you kind of thinking about as you're going, and you're changing your mind as you go, as new information comes to light? You're sort of thinking a different way about the people that you've met.
Oh, I'm so happy you said that because I was hoping to have that effect. I wanted to write a fun book that would make you think, right? And uh, if your reaction is typical, then I'm delighted.
Well, I mean, I don't know how your reviews have been going from
It,
everybody else, but
uh,
um,
so far, so good. You know, the I think I'm averaging over 4 in Goodreads, which is quite hard to do. Over 4 in the sort of Amazon star reviews. I think people who've read it mostly like it. It's I don't read my reviews um, because they I just don't. I think, but I do look at the averages. So long as the averages are up there, I feel that I've given the reader a good time because I think you know I I write because I like telling stories, right? But the joy of telling stories is how they land, right? Either with the listener or with the reader. And if the reader isn't enjoying it, then I have failed. That's my basic view. So far so far the reviews have been fine. Um, someone was telling me, this is a complete aside, but someone was telling me that there's some kind of app. I think he called it Goodreads. But there's an app you can apparently buy, and you put it into your browser, and then it will filter out all the Goodreads reviews that are below 4 stars. so that you only read the nicer reviews. And then, if you read a 4-star review and you said, I like this and I like this, but I didn't like that, then you can take that on board. But I don't know if he was pulling my leg or not. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to find it, but maybe I should.
It's not a thing I've heard of. There is a website, I think, where you can see if like an animal gets harmed. And
Oh,
so
okay.
you can choose not to read it if that's not a thing you enjoy.
No, that's I mean, I've heard, I've been to a number of uh, crime conventions where, authors have done awful things to their human characters, but have been castigated because they've hurt an animal, you know. And the general message I took from that was don't kill animals or otherwise harm them in the making of your novel.
Don't give people pets either. We've got an author called Mike M.W. Craven in our group, and he's got the main detective has a pet, like a pet dog, and
Mm.
he has had questions of like you've not. He has to write in his book now if the detective's going away that he's dropped the dog off somewhere to be looked after because people will pay attention if he's not looked after him.
Oh no, no! I think that's right. I think that's right. One of my debut novel was actually my fourth manuscript. So for those of you listening into this who are not yet published, there is hope, right? Just keep plugging away. But one of my earlier manuscripts, I had a pet, and um, I wrote the pet out because it was too. I knew the pet was being neglected, so I just thought, no, no pet for this character.
So, I mean, I've got several questions as a fan. I kind of want to know if we're ever going to see Ethan again in another
Oh
story.
gosh, I would never say never. All right, I'm not one of those people who necessarily set out to write series, you know, but I'm not necessarily against it. I did, with the Straight Mystery, with the Quiet Teacher, I wrote a sequel, Two Times Murder, and I'm almost certainly going to start work on a new one of those um, at the end of this year, almost certainly. But my other books are meant to be standalones, but that doesn't mean that they will be. I mean, for instance, there's what I'm working on now is in the same universe as my debut novel, Breaking Day, which is a space opera, right? But in that, there is a police officer type character that I really enjoyed writing. And so I've come back to that universe some 20 odd years earlier to write that guy's origin story. So that will be kind of murder mystery as well, but that really will be sci-fi. That will not be, that will be a murder in space, right? Not a murder in Chicago, Illinois. Um, so I'm not averse to coming back, but I have no plans for Ethan right now. You know, um, that I do wonder how Ethan is going to explain what he's been through to his superiors. And I do wonder if Ethan's adventures in this book would go unnoticed by the government, you know. But I don't have present plans for Ethan.
I'm going to keep fingers crossed that you end up with future plans, Ethan.
Well, thank you, thank you.
And I think even in sci-fi, there's one of my favorite sci-fi series, The Expanse,
Mm,
has a superb detective character
yes,
and
yes.
almost like a brilliant like crime. I mean, the TV show is a brilliant like crime episode that's like watching a noir movie, but the books themselves are also fabulous when he's
Oh,
involved.
yes, yes. No, I think that's right, and I think at the risk of going off the rails for crime readers here, which is all of you. You know, I think one of the joys about science fiction is um, science fiction is not defined by plot. right? So, crime in a sense is defined by plot. You have to have a murder, right? You have to have a mystery. You have to have something approaching a solution. Um, but in science fiction, you can write about anything, right? You have if you think about Star Wars, you've got romance and all sorts of things. If you think about The Expanse, you've got space battles, but you've also got some really noir type mysteries that get solved. There is no type of story you cannot tell in a sci-fi setting if you want to. So, for those of you who are thinking about dipping a toe in the water, there are quite a lot of sci-fi mysteries that you can cut your teeth on before you find yourself wandering deeper and deeper into the genre.
So is what you're writing now kind of another sort of what you would call straight, like a sort of actual sci-fi?
Yes, it's actual sci-fi with a murder mystery in it, but that's not the only thing in it. And I think for me, and again, we're probably getting off topic, but for me, there has to be science in sci-fi, and the interest in it is, technologies that presently exist, perhaps. What will they look like a little way into the future? What problems will develop? Because if you think about things like um, test tube babies, the first test tube baby was 1974, right? If you'd written that about a test tube baby in 1970,
I think
right?
she was 1978, the first.
78? No,
Yeah.
you're probably right. You're right. You're right. 78. My bad. So
So
if you
he was born the
okay,
same year as me.
so yeah, so if you'd written about artificially created, life created outside the womb, even in 1976, that was science fiction, right? And if you were writing about that and the issues that we have, you couldn't do surrogacy in the way that you can now. You can't do that without IVF. And these are the sorts of issues that were being explored long before. So that when they come around, there's actually a body of thought about this. I mean, with IVF, it's not quite the same. But if you think about, say, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where they have all these breeding programs, etc., etc. I think that was written. You're clearly better at dates than I am. I'm going to say it was written in 1932, right? So the thinking about these things are already in existence. And I think that's one of the fun things about science fiction. You can look at present day science and push it forward and say, well, this is cool. Now, what is the social impact of this being cool? Because there's always a social impact, which is, what we're dealing with AI right now, for instance. And, sci-fi writers have been writing about AI for, you know, certainly since the 30s, right? So there's a lot of thought on our end about how AI is and how it impacts people that other people are only now getting to grips with, and frankly making a right mess of getting to grips with it. But that's probably a topic for another time.
So then I guess a question that I would ask a crime author who is maybe writing something that was more based on forensics, and I'll ask you for your sci-fi, is how important do you think it is to get the science right when you're writing about it?
Um, I think you should try and get it mostly right most of the time. You know, um, I mean, for instance, if you are writing a story about um, a starship, right? No one knows how to go from one star to another. We just don't, right? So the science has got to be wrong, right? It has to be wrong. But that doesn't mean that the things around that have to be wrong. I mean, people still need to breathe, right? They need to have air supply. Gravity still exists. Mostly, you can write gravity out in science fiction, but I think that the further you get away from science or forensics, right? If you're writing a crime story that's heavily based on forensics, then I think you really have to get it right. There's really no excuse not to. And if you don't, then readers who love that type of book are going to notice, because even if you're not an expert, they will be, because they've read so much. Why would you get it wrong, right? I mean, you may want to bend things a little bit to serve story, right? So, for instance, and this isn't really about the science; it's more like the process of it. If you look at most TV shows, um, they have one character who's the forensics expert, right? And they do everything, right? Whereas in reality, you probably have dozens of people in different labs doing different things depending on the skill set. So that's not authentic. You're bending reality for the story there, but the science they rely on ought to be good. Right?
Because I feel like in Esperance, there's moments where I feel like you've done a lot of research just to answer sort of things like going back to the people being drowned. There's a lot of like discussion of when you're going through all the steps. I feel like that had quite a bit of research.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a fair bit. I mean, some of the weirdness is weird, right? With no real science behind it yet, one hopes, right?
No, but
But
then
the rest
that's
of it,
kind of okay. I
yeah.
think by that point you're willing to suspend your disbelief.
But I think there are other things that are, very very much science based, and I think the ending for one of the characters is fairly poignant because of science, right? Science sort of dictates that outcome for that character. And so yeah, I did a fair bit of research. I'm kind of a geek in the sense that I have a mind like my former great aunt's attic, which is just full of random stuff jammed together, higgledy piggledy. So I don't necessarily do a lot of research for a book, right? Because I already know a lot of things, and typically I know enough to get started on research, and then with Dr. Google or a phone call, it's not a huge amount of extra work. It's just a little extra work. But yes, I mean, I tried to get, um, you know, the basics of, I mean, for what it's worth, um, there's a character in the book quite early on who explains how the shed aquarium makes its seawater. As far as I'm aware, that's all true. I looked it up and I did the work, and she makes a comment about the chemicals that go into seawater, and how one tiny component could be lethal. Yeah, that's all accurate. I try to get the science as accurate as I can without, you don't want to bore people with it, just enough to, to reflect what that type of character would be telling a police officer who's not a scientist, right? So I figure if the police officer can understand, then the rest of us should do okay.
I'm intrigued by your day job as well because I feel like you probably have a lot of interesting information that obviously you can't talk about from your day job. I'm sure you must get tapped by crime authors for information every now and again.
I do occasionally. I mean, I actually gave a talk to the Scottish um, chapter of the Crime Writers Association a couple of months ago on money laundering, right? How it works, etc. But not at a huge technical level, because you don't need to know it at a huge technical level. You just need to have this sense that you take money, and you rattle it around in the financial system so no one is sure where it comes from, right? And then you spit it out at the other end, and you pretend it's, that you're the heir of an oil fortune in a distant country, or that you invested or whatever. I mean, that's all you need to know for money laundering, in a sense. So, yeah, I'm happy to talk about it at that level. You don't need to know about Vostro and Nostro accounts, and uh, um, and the mechanics of how the Swift system works, or the ACH system works for sending wires internationally. You just don't, right? But to tell a story, that it's, you only need the concepts. I mean, it would be a very odd story not an impossible story, but it would be a really odd story that really dived into the guts of money laundering. I mean, you just need to know that someone got money from a dodgy, circumstances, and then, lied about where it came from. That's money laundering in a sense.
So when you're prepping to write something, what you sort of said you got a character for your other crime series first. With Esperance, what came to you first as the idea?
So Esperance is it's a little different because it's actually based on a historical incident. You've read it, so you'll know what I'm talking about, right? But that that incident is recorded in a law report from the 1780s, 1783, and it just so happens that I'm a lawyer by training, and I went to law school at a time when law reports were in books rather than in computers. So the lecturer would send you off to read a particular case at page X in a particular volume, and it was always boring, always, right? But the old reports from 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, on either side of these cases that the lecturer wanted you to read, there were other cases that no one ever reads anymore, right? And they're little slices of life, right? They're written contemporaneously at the time. And I found them fascinating. I just found them fascinating for the stories. And I just stumbled um, on this particular case. And the fact pattern was so shocking to me that it stayed with me for years and years. And then I'm still living in the States when I start this book, and I was literally on the porch doing that very British thing of drinking tea, and I just had this idea about how I could turn that sort of fact into a novel, and that's how Esperance began.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's too important to the story to talk about the historical fact, isn't it? And you can, I think as they uncover that, that sort of is the bits that often change your mind about
Mm, yeah,
what is happening.
I think
Very
that's right.
powerful story.
I think that's right. No, I do. I just, when I was writing it, I was thinking, given how it was structured, I was thinking, I have no idea how I'm going to talk about this without giving it all away, right? And here I am, still struggling with how to talk about this without giving it all away. But yes, the historical incident that's at the root of the book is real, and as I said, I stumbled across it years ago at university, and it's on that incident that everything else turns.
I think you've done very well so far at talking about it without giving anything away. We're on a roll. We've done fairly well so far. Hopefully, we're persuading people to buy it
Fingers crossed.
without giving anything away, which is quite a challenge. But I think the sort of inciting incident that's mentioned and that we have talked about with the sort of locked room case, you can talk about that, and that's enough to draw people in.
I hope
Even if
so.
you can't give the other things away,
Yeah,
not
I
happy
hope so.
for that.
You know.
I was told from the back, to be
Oh,
honest.
yeah.
Sometimes when I first got it, I read the back and was like, yeah, this is going to be.
you know. Well, good, good. I'm glad. No, and I think the mystery itself is intriguing enough. It should keep people. If you know, you don't have to like science fiction, but if you like mysteries, you should enjoy this one. I mean, it's a fun ride, I think, from
Yeah, it's
beginning
a
to
very
end.
good mystery. And it keeps you going. And like, because there are so many other threads that then come in, you are so involved in like what's happening that even when the kind of more science fiction bits come in, you're so invested by that point, even if you're
Mm,
You're new to that, you wouldn't mind because you just need to know how things are going to work out.
yeah, yeah. I hope so, and I think again, you know, um, I don't. It does. I don't think it matters what genre it is. I think the best examples of the genre, whether it's crime or science fiction or romance or thrillers, the best examples of all those genres, it's the people, right? It's the characters that matter. That's what draws you in. They're the great versions of those genres all have great characters that you want to get invested in because, stories really are about people, so regardless of what you're writing, I think, how people are with each other, is at the core of the best one.
And I think you've got that. I think you've got that with Ethan. I think you've got it with Holly. I think you've got it with Abby. They're all like really brilliant characters
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
that you're solidly invested in, and they're very real characters, aren't they? The Ethan's got problems when he's beginning. The police don't always make the right choices throughout. Sometimes they do silly things while they're investigating and they get frustrated, and
Yeah,
there's lots of other things going on, and that it just makes it more real, I think.
that's the hope. I mean, I do, I do believe that, I'm a big fan of, generally speaking, of cock up over conspiracy, right? People just make mistakes. It's part of the human condition, and sometimes mistakes work out better than the original plan. And often they don't, but sometimes they do. And a character that doesn't make mistakes, a character that doesn't make misjudgments from time to time, that's not real. We all screw things up, and our characters should as well. You know, well, that's my view. I think they should.
So when you're not writing, what do you like to read? Are you a science fiction guy, or do you read a mixture? Do you like
I
crime?
I do like crime. I read a lot of science fiction, and I read some other stuff, including crime. But you know, um, you will know this, and a lot of your crime writer listeners will know this. Crime writers, when they get together, love love to have quizzes about crime fiction. You do not want me on your team. I'm useless. I'm just dead weight in that regard. What I know best is science fiction. So I would say probably 60% of what I read is science fiction, and then the rest is a mix of historical fiction, crime fiction, thrillers. Um, I used to read a lot of fantasy. I don't read fantasy anymore, and I occasionally read romance, right? Um, Mainly because romance is a sometimes derided genre, which is insane because I think more romance books are sold than any other time, right? Um, to write a good romance, you've got to be good with people, right? You've got to be good with relationships. And no one does it better, in my view, than romance writers. So just occasionally I will pick up a romance and read it. And I quite enjoy them, but mostly I read those to learn. There's a lot to learn from romance writers, and I'm perfectly happy to do that.
So, who are your favourite science fiction authors?
Oh, um, I like, I grew up with the golden age, what are called golden age science fiction authors. So Arthur C. Clarke, Robert Heinlein, people like that. There's an American author called C.J. Cherry, who's not as well known here, who I think just writes absolutely brilliant science fiction. I think she does terrific work. And then there is a British author called Adrian Tchaikovsky, who is based in Bristol, I think,
I think he's
who's
Leeds.
just a remarkable writer. I mean, if I were to sell my soul to the devil, it would be to write like him. I just think he's fabulous at what he does.
I was going to say my favourite, like, classic sci-fi authors are Philip K. Dick and probably John Wyndham.
Oh yes, yes. I did. I read a lot of John Wyndham. Philip K. Dick frightened me. The stories frightened me. I read them. I think I read them too young. You know,
Maybe. Yeah, I think
uh,
you can read them as an
uh,
adult.
yeah, I read them as a sort of 11 maybe. I think I was too young to start reading Philip K. Dick, and they I think they scarred me a little bit.
And then modern ones, it would be James S.A. Corey, who writes The Expanse, and Adrian Tchaikovsky.
Mm. No, no, they're terrific. I mean, they are terrific. The Expanse books are wonderful, wonderful books, and um, uh, they're kind of, well, you can see why they turned them into a TV show. They're so cinematic, the James S.A. Corey books, and um, I don't, James S.A. Corey, as you know, is a pseudonym for two people. Um, and I ought to know why they came up with James S.A. Corey, but I don't actually know why they came up with that name. But yes, they write terrific page-turning sci-fi. Again, with I mean, they're sort of sometimes, they're noir. They can be sort of Wild West adventures in space, but there's a lot of science underpinning, which is very helpful and I think makes the thing more real.
Yeah. And what have you read recently and really enjoyed? It can be anything. You can tell us any. We don't mind. We're open to
Oh
a genre.
gosh, I'm reading a book by a new author called Rasheen Dunnett, called A Line We Have Traced. I mean, it's not. It's a sort of time travel novel about three women who live in different periods of time, um, uh, all in Britain. One in I think between the wars, one in the present day, and one at the end of the world. And they're connected together somehow, but I can't tell you because I haven't finished. So I'm working. That's what I'm presently reading. I you know, I just finished an Anne Cleeve's book from years back called Cold Earth, which is one of the Shetland novels, which has been, which is interesting because um, I've watched all the Shetland shows religiously, but I've not read the books. Cold Earth is literally the first one I've read, and they're distinctly different. They're different in interesting ways. So those are the two that are foremost in my mind at the moment. And then I've got, I think I'm going to read a non-fiction book next about COVID, right? I think I'm far enough away to be not so traumatized that I think it's probably time to look back and read some critiques of what we got right and what we got wrong. So that's my reading trajectory at the moment.
Fair enough. Um, do you, because the thing we've not talked about as much as the sort of, we've mentioned the sort of hints of the Nigerian culture and language in it. The only other book I can think of where that's really seamlessly blended in is T.L. Huchu's Roper Moyo series. It's like urban fantasy.
I've not read those. They've been recommended to me, and I think I should read them, but I
Yeah,
haven't
I'd
as yet.
recommend them. And he lives in Edinburgh, so you could.
He does. You're right. So really, I should.
You could meet him.
You can. I mean, Edinburgh. Um, for those of you who've never been here, it's not a big place, right? But it's crawling. It's crawling with writers. All sorts. Yeah. I mean, Ian Rankin first and foremost, but we have so many here. And in all sorts of genres. It's just brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're a big fan, and we have a Scottish admin who's watching. She said hello. Called Patricia, who goes to lots of book events around Edinburgh.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's there. they're accessible, they're easy, and yeah, there's always something going on here, always. And because it's not because it's not a big place, it's easy to get to. It just makes it that much more accessible. You don't have to spend, if you live in London, everything is going on in London, but it could take you 2 hours to get there. Whereas here you can just hop the tram or the bus or walk, and you're there in a few minutes.
I'm going to fly the flag for Yorkshire as good for book festivals as well. Like
Yes,
at Harrogate, there's
yes.
Bradford Literature Festival really near me that's always fabulous and very multicultural.
Mm. Well, I'm looking forward. They've invited me to Harrogate this year to talk about Esperance. I've never been, um, uh, and I'm really looking forward to that. I think that should be just terrific.
Are you on a panel?
I am. I am. I can't remember who else is on it. I need to find out. But again, you quite often find this. I mean, all of your listeners who go to crime festivals will know this. These days, there's always a panel about science fiction and mystery, always of some description. I mean, they may title it differently, but there's always one panel where that's the subject, and I've been asked to go and speak on that panel at Harrogate this year. So
There
I'm very
weren't
much
that
looking.
many until recently. We run a live event as a book group in Leeds every year, and we've got a like a speculative crime panel.
Mm. Yeah, I think yeah. I mean, my book festival knowledge goes back only a handful of years, really. But they've always been one, in the limited time I've been there. Which again, I mean, I think it speaks to the curiosity of crime readers, right? That they will follow a mystery almost anywhere if if it's sufficiently intriguing, even into the sort of outer edges of geeky sci-fi, heads the panels.
Well, as someone who likes geeky sci-fi, the reason that there's a science fiction and crime panel at our festival is because I was in charge of the programming.
Good for you. Good for you. I'm glad. I'm
I
glad.
was like, we're just having this one.
Yeah, fly the flag. But I do. I think people. I think it's it's they're fun reads in and of themselves because they're a twist on the story, that the types of stories that mystery readers are used to reading. So it's a just a nice change of pace. But it's a gateway to a different genre. You know, um, and because I often uh, when I talk to people, I talk to science fiction people who say, well, I like science fiction. Why would I read Agatha Christie? Right. Well, my response is, well, don't start with Agatha Christie, right? Start with, some sci-fi mysteries and work towards Agatha Christie. And you'll be there before you know it, and the reverse trip, which is what I'm trying to sell to your listeners, is also equally plausible route, and you can stop wherever, if it gets too weird, don't go any further, but take a step or two and see what it's like.
I think people's gateway is often the stuff like Rivers of London and
Yes. Yeah,
like
yeah,
Uchi's books and things that are like crime but with that element of the mysterious.
exactly, and you like that, you try something else, and people do. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, that is the absolute perfect gateway into sci-fi mystery, speculative mystery, and will open up a whole series of stories and tropes you may not be familiar with. So if you want to change your pace, great place to start.
So one of my favourite author chat questions when we first started doing these live interviews. So I can't ask it normally because if we get returning people, I've already used it. But you and you're geeky, so you can have this question. Would you like to have a graphic novel version of one of your books?
Yes, I mean, so long as I didn't have to write it, because, um, well, I don't know. Maybe I'd have a go at writing it. Having said that, no, it would be fun. The reason I hesitate is it's a different medium, and you want someone who understands it, right, and can bring the best out of it, because it's like, um, I mean, the dialogue is like haiku, right? It's very, you can't have, the pictures tell a lot of the story, right? The dialogue, has to complement the pictures in a particular way. I don't know that's a skill set I have, because I wouldn't mind trying, but I don't know that's a skill set I have. But if someone came to me and said, I'd love to adapt your novel into a graphic novel, I'd be intrigued. I'd be all for it.
Have you had any adaptation interest, sort of TV or filmically, for Esperance? Because
Uh,
it reads like a movie. Like you could,
Um,
I would watch that at the cinema.
I ran into someone the other day who just read it, and they said, they literally stopped me on the street. That not a complete stranger. They knew who I was and I knew who they were, but I didn't know them very well. And they said to me, "I just finished your book, and I want to say two things. And the first is the ending, almost brought me to tears, and it should be a movie." That was the two things they said. No, is the short answer. But the way these things work mostly is, you know, TV offers or options come later, after the book's been out and about. So, um, I've had other books. I'm not sure I can say which, right? I have other books that are optioned for television, which doesn't mean that they'll ever get made, but they've been optioned for television. And that happened, you know, years, yeah, year, 2 years after the actual publication. Um, if you, um, again, to go back to sci-fi, I am presently snarling at Apple TV, which is dropping episodes of a show called Murderbot in weekly installments, and it's driving me nuts because I want to binge the whole lot. And I mention it because that's a show that's just arrived on the TV screen in respect of a novella that has been out. It's got to have been out 6, 7, 8 years by now. So it's a long process. Now you're better at dates, so if you're familiar with Murderbot, you can get the right date for me. But
I'm not, but I'm
it's
thinking that Silo, which is on
yes,
Apple TV, is fabulous and is Hugh Howey's Wool
wool.
trilogy, isn't it? Which I
Yeah,
read a really long time ago. Like
yeah.
I
So
remember reading the trilogy, and when they were making it, I was like, I'm sure that's Wool, and I had to go back and remind myself about the book.
yeah, yeah. Wool has been out. I mean, gosh, it's well over 10 years. I'm not even going to guess now. But yes. So it's a very, very long pipeline between writing a book and getting it optioned, and then even if it's optioned, it still has to be made. And then even if they start to make it, they may not like the result. There's a lot of ways these things don't get to the screen. Um, but I live in hope. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
And then we have got a minute left, so remind people what they're going to go and buy.
Okay, the book is called Esperance. It's
I've
by
got
Oyebanji, and there it is. Please buy it. If you don't like it, re-gift it to someone you think will like it, and if they don't like it, then they can use it for fuel when the apocalypse comes.
and then thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I'm such a fan.
Thanks.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.